I'd like to start out with just the most recent of Bloomberg's many innovations, including in the digital realm, namely this 24-hour streaming news network that you are going to be doing in tandem with Twitter. Very, very interesting. Tell us a little bit, if you would please, about how it's going to work and what's the thinking behind that.
Sure. So I might start with a bit of context on Bloomberg, because I typically find audiences may not actually know a lot about Bloomberg. How many of you feel like you've got a pretty good grasp of what Bloomberg does? Okay, so that's great in this room. So we are a financial services company, but we also have a significant media operation. But the media operation was initially launched in order to really support the terminal business. The terminal has about 320,000 customers around the globe, and is really, the terminal has about 100 billion pieces of data, news, context, which becomes the backbone for the global markets. Is there anybody that uses a terminal in here? Okay, a few, great, excellent. So you know how powerful the terminal is. But the news division was launched in order to provide information, obviously, into the terminal. We publish about 5,000 stories and pieces of research a day, about 5,000 stories, about 500 pieces of research. And of that, about 20% goes to the consumer platforms. So our website, TV, product, et cetera. And what we've seen, and you guys heard it this morning, the number of, how many of you are consuming more news than you have year over year? Okay. And how many of you are less confident in the news you're getting? Okay, so there's a recent survey was just done. 80% of people are consuming more news, which I would argue is a great thing as long as it's quality. But people are far less trusting, which is what we got at this morning. So there's lots of reasons which we'll talk about. But what Melinda's referencing is last week we announced a partnership with Twitter. Because one of the mega trends that's happening is obviously people are consuming more of their news on social platforms. And it depends on where you live as to which platform is preferred. In the US, 150 million people a day choose to use Twitter as a platform. If you go into Asia, Twitter's very popular in Japan, but not so much across the rest of Asia. I know here in Germany, Twitter's not the preferred social platform. So it's going to be uneven as to the applicability of this new product, depending on the Twitter platform to start. But the intent is to take advantage of the fact that so many people are now using social media as their first source for breaking news. And the challenge is if the quality of that news on those platforms isn't good, we end in the places that we have been, in the most recent election. In fact, one stat that will disturb you, but was kind of referred to this morning, is right before Trump's election, the top 4 out of 5 trending pieces on Facebook were not real. 4 out of 5, which is just stunning if you think about it. So again, the importance of these platforms are critical. Our job is that one of the things we can do as a brand is make sure that we are helping to partner with and differentiate ourselves on those platforms where we're actually making the quality of the product better. So I have a picture's worth 1,000 words. I have a very short video to show you that illustrates what this product will be. It is designed to be 24/7. It will launch with 8 hours of live programming. And we like to think about it as what you would create today if you could create a breaking news network, not unlike CNN did in 1982, but with the technology that we have today. So Lawrence, if you can just play that quick clip. So we just announced that last week. So we are just now beginning with the details on the product development, but that gives you a sense of the vision.
So here's one question, and I'll do what journalists do and zero in on potential risks. The opportunities and excitement are pretty clear from that. But apparently, from what I understand, at least some of the content, a lot of the content is going to be coming from Twitter users' feeds. How worried are you that you will get caught up in that tide, swept away by that tide of fake news? Controlling that is going to be a challenge.
Yeah, our intent is to curate that. So even the Periscope content, we would have at least some curated and light editing to make sure that what's coming through is first identified from our editors and then determined as to how it fits into the platform. So it is leveraging the technology, but it is still has a layer of editing that today does not happen in general.
Takes a lot of resources to do that. Just one reminder, and I'm sure you know this story, The Guardian put that white
Yes.
shark on its front page.
Yes.
Do you remember that? That was citizen journalism.
Yes.
Somebody sent in this great picture of
Yep.
a white shark. Where was that supposed to be? I forget. But anyway, it was
don't know.
fake news. It was
Yeah.
fake news, and The Guardian simply couldn't get on top
Top
of
of fast
checking
enough.
that. What kind of resources are you going to be able to dedicate to this effort to try to curate that?
Yeah, one of the things that is, we're fortunate at Bloomberg in that we are a private firm that is not dependent on advertising for our media operation. Now, we very much operate with advertising. We care deeply about our advertisers, but we're a vertically integrated company with the core product being very different. Our business model is very different. So we can invest in journalists and in editors and in data and technology platforms in order to do this. Probably different than a lot of media organizations can, and we get that responsibility very much and don't take that for granted, but actually believe it is if anything, now probably more than ever, there's such a responsibility to provide, broad news, considering that there's so many. I would argue, I grew up in the newspaper business, so the first 18 years of my career. I love that you said about 20 years. It's been more than that, ladies. But the first almost 20 years of my career was in newspapers, and I was part of the Gannett organization, and if you look at how that organization, I joined them in the late 80s, that organization is so different today. And I would argue communities are different by virtue of the fact that many of them cannot sustain a local newspaper in the way that we used to. And it's one of the many things that concerns me, but makes me really proud to be part of an organization that can invest in journalism.
So that's great and enviable, I have to say, from the point of view of a journalist working for a television operation that doesn't have those kind of resources potentially. What do you think, stepping back a moment, what do you think about the degree to which the social media platforms themselves are taking curatorial responsibility? Should they be doing a lot more? And if so, how do we compel them or persuade them to do that?
That's a great question. I think that just last week, Facebook announced that they were going to hire, I think, 3,000 people to better edit and manage this. But this is coming after they've had people killing each other, on Facebook Live and suicides and lots of things that would suggest that there's, really far concerns. I think they're understanding that. YouTube did the same thing. They're hiring a bunch of people in order to manage some of the challenges that top brands, some in this room have had with their brands being positioned with content that they do not want to be positioned with. That's the progression of programmatic buying, which many of you probably know. It's where the ads are being placed with, machines and a lot of data and intelligence, which allows you to target much better. But there's always a downside, and so the downside is that it's getting placed against content they don't want. I would say that everybody has responsibility. So I think first and foremost, the platforms have to stand up and help support the people that are relying on their platform and help make sure that the content there is better. But I also think advertisers have to pay more attention. I ran an agency before joining Bloomberg, and you think about a great example is Bill O'Reilly when he was terminated. It wasn't because, I'm sorry if anybody in here is from Fox, but I don't think it was because Fox finally woke up and said he shouldn't be doing that. It was because hundreds of advertisers said, we're not going to support the show anymore. So what used to be a money thing, they wouldn't get rid of him because of the money. Now they were compelled to because that dynamic was changing. So advertisers can make this choice. Brands can make this choice. And I think consumers can. I think that every single one of us has a responsibility when we look at a story to see if it's coming from a well-trusted brand that's reporting on that. So I think the whole ecosystem owns part of this, but certainly I think advertisers have more power than they've exerted to date.
Surveys such as Richard Edelman's Trust Barometer show that trust in mass media is dramatically
all-time
falling.
low, yeah.
And we know about the role of the mass media in helping Donald Trump rise to power. they are implicated in many examples of rising populism. What do media leaders need to do? What is digital or any kind of media leadership in the face of that challenge?
Yeah, again, growing up in the newspaper business, I've sort of watched what I think is an evolution of sort of these ideological clusters that have happened. And if you just take the United States, and forgive me for using the United States as an example, but because of Trump, it's an unfortunate good one. But if you think about where the media is, it is largely aggregated to the coast. And so if you think about the what used to be rural America and the populations there, that's where a lot of the jobs have been. That's where a lot of the newspapers have struggled more. And so I worry about the fact that as those jobs have eroded and they've been replaced by the digital jobs, there's a lot of digital jobs that are coming into. In fact, in the 2015, for the first time, the digital internet jobs were past the total number of people that were employed in journalism in the U.S. And so all of a sudden, a lot of these digital journalism jobs. The problem is they are, again, clustered on the coast because of where the talent is. And so what strikes me is you now have a lot of journalists who are living in communities that are very, very like-minded. And so maybe we're just missing this whole mood that exists in other places that is just under what we found in the election, just underreported.
That was, in fact, one of the charges that was made in regard to pollsters
exactly right.
before the Trump victory.
There were a lot of people
they were
saying,
in the bubble.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that is true. I mean, it's you're a product of where you live and who you talk to and who your community is. And yeah, I do think there's some of that. And I think we have responsibility to break out of that in some way.
Let me ask you again about the role of the social media platforms also as competitors for the media, because you have just reminded us Bloomberg is in a very comfortable position, but a lot of other media enterprises are not. And they are facing these tech companies with deep
right.
pockets.
Yeah.
What happens with that, and what do we need to do to keep independent journalism alive?
I guess another role for the platforms. You think about, just to give you an indication of the ad dollars, there's still about 65% of the ad dollars are in TV and print and other things, but the huge piece of that is shifted to digital. But of every new dollar that goes to digital, about 80% goes to either Google or Facebook. So a huge disproportionate amount. And there's a great, I have failed to remember the author's name, but if you search today, there's a great piece in the New York Times by one of its columnists on exactly this issue. And the fact that you have so much of the dollars going to the platforms that depend actually on the local news and on the news organizations in order to populate their feeds. And yet they can't do it without the advertising support. And one of the things that this reporter talked about was the role of advertisers, but also the role of Facebook and Twitter and Google and others to really make sure that they are doing what they can to support local journalism and local advertising and local support, because they know ultimately it supports their platform.
On the other hand, there also seem to be some slight changes going on with the social media platforms themselves. Twitter apparently has now faced its first decline in revenue for the first time, and Facebook says that it is now going to be sharing ad revenues with content suppliers. So what's going on there?
So that's part of the fix, right? So they need to share that revenue, because otherwise they won't be able to continue to get that content, because all of the suppliers that they're counting on, all the journalists, they need that level of support. So that's one of the strategies you're seeing in order to support it. I think the challenges, and we've probably been more vocal about this than most, is ceding your relationship with any customer to a platform in this case is, ultimately a brand wants to have the direct relationship with that customer. And I think that for all of us who are in the business of creating content, We have to work really, really hard to make sure our content is differentiated, but we also need to maintain that direct relationship with that customer and use the platform strategically where we can, but not, in a perfect world, you wouldn't be reliant on them for your audience because they can change their algorithms or their policies at any point, and then we're struggling again. But I think that is a perfect example of what they're trying to do to support journalism.
For you, as a person who's been in the field for a while, beyond Twitter, are there other digital enterprises that you're looking at, BuzzFeed, say, where you say, this is a really interesting, innovative group that has been made possible by digitalization, so it's not all bad?
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's a few that we look at. And I would say, I mean, I think that all of this is positive because, the digital revolution has allowed brands to provide different and more content in different ways in different places to really surround consumers. So it's not a bad thing. It's a matter of how do we keep investing in it. But, we look at Cheddar a lot. Cheddar is a new digital-based TV product that is launched in New York. It's very US-centric right now. Politico, I think Politico is a great example of a wonderful brand that was launched as a result. Vox, Vice, all those brands are brands that we look at and I think are, they're doing a few things really great, which is they have identified a very specific niche and they are owning that niche for their audience. They're very clear about who they're programming for.
Let's come to another one of Bloomberg's innovations, namely climatechanged.com. Changed,
yes.
A website that is dedicated to the impact of climate change.
Yep.
That seems somewhat counter-cyclical if you look at trends in the U.S.
Yes.
Will this really help you gain market share? Is there such an interest out there?
Climate for us is a really important topic. One of the other unknown facts about Bloomberg is almost 100% of our profits go to Bloomberg Philanthropies. And Bloomberg Philanthropies is focused on several things, climate being a huge one. Mike just came out with a new book that he did with Carl Pope on climate and launched the C40, which is a group of now 85 mayors. We called it the C40, now it would be the C85, I guess, that are focused on climate change. So climate for us as a brand is something we cover very, very deeply, and certainly a lot of our philanthropic dollars go into it. So we think it's a critical topic, which is why we chose to call out a very specific place of our website for it. We don't have that brand across all of our platforms yet. It's just on the website, and we'll see. But
who do you think will be the main users for that?
Well, it's designed to be for our end audience, for our consumers who have a real passion for climate and want to understand more about it.
Thank you very much. Leadership and diversity, obviously here also a crucial issue. You have launched a financial services gender equality index, which focuses on benchmarking gender equality in the financial services industry. Now, I have to say I work a good deal in that branch. Most of the rooms I enter are about 80% male, if not more. How will measuring that actually change anything?
So we launched we call it the GEI a year ago. We launched it in May of last year. And we launched it with 26 companies to start with, all in the financial services area. And our intent is, Bloomberg's always been about adding transparency to opaque markets. That started with the bond market, and now we've moved it to gender. Because our belief is that if we measure it, if everybody is there's nobody that usually disagrees with the fact that diversity around a table drives better business decisions. But there's not a focused metric to prove that. And so our intent is to make that data very transparent. There's 4 measurements on the Gender Equality Index. The first is statistics. So things like how many women are on your board, how many women are in top leadership positions, are you paying women comparably? How have you managed the wage gap? So those are questions that either are in the public information that we can pull and or in a survey that every company fills out. We also look at the policies of the company. We look at its products. Are they developing products that are specific for diverse populations? And then we also look at the community. What are they doing in the community to make a difference? And all of that goes into this index. So our intent is to add transparency to it. Diversity and inclusion as a whole is incredibly important to Bloomberg. Our chairman, Peter Grauer, is the head of the 30% Club in the US. And we launched a segment last year called Walk the Talk, which is on our TV product as well as the website, which is to answer John Micklethwaite, who's our editor, will often say that he will interview a CEO, and right when the camera goes off or the pen goes down, and they talk about what's really a struggle, the CEO will talk about this commitment to diversity and inclusion, and yet not being able to make a significant change or difference. And so we launched this segment called Walk the Talk because we are featuring CEOs who have really made a step change. An example is Mark Benioff from Salesforce. We had him on and he talked about his decision to just fix the wage gap at Salesforce, spending $3 million to do it. But he just decided to push the button and make the change. And we had him on to talk about that in hopes that it inspires others to do that same kind of work.
So you modestly attributed this to Bloomberg as a whole, but in fact, Multi-Channel News named you to their 2017 class of Women to Watch, saying that you are a champion of inclusion for your programs that are focused on promoting diversity. So clearly, you're also walking the talk.
Yeah.
Is this basically a kind of a moral or sisterhood commitment for you, or do you also see it having real business advantages for you personally also in your role?
Absolutely the latter. And as a result, I benefit from the former, I would say. But you know, what's different for me, and I wish there were more people like me, I will say I was a bit naive, realizing that I grew up my entire career at Gannett not realizing I was a woman leader. I just was a leader. I was treated like everyone else. We always had diversity around the table. And, you know, our management committee back then was 60-40. Our head of legal was woman. Our head of marketing, marketing and HR are typically where you'll find the women. We at one point had a CFO that was woman. I mean, it is the CFO of Gannett at the time is now the CEO of the spun-off company. So I was always around diverse groups of people, and I never realized how unique that was, candidly. And so because the companies that I had been fortunate to work for had been really successful, and now I realize it was a result of that diversity around the table. It was just better thinking and a real willingness to hear each other. And so as a result, I think I want that for other people. And I know it can make a difference.
Thank you very much. Perfect last words for the end of the first day of Global Female Leaders.
Yes. So and thank you for hanging with us.
Many thanks to Jacki Kelley for being with us.
Happy to do it.